Sergeant Ethan Blackwell stood at the front of the massive chamber, his worn boots echoing against the cold, metallic floor. The Galactic Empire's high command spread before him, an array of alien dignitaries, generals, and bureaucrats whose faces were inscrutable under their ceremonial helmets and hoods. To them, he was just another human, fragile, unimportant. Their dismissive stares grated on his nerves, but he held his ground. This was no time to show weakness. "General Blackwell, you may speak now." The Empire's Grand Admiral Zeron's voice rumbled, dismissive and uninterested, as he leaned back in his ornate chair. His gaze never wavered from the holographic map that showed the Empire's ongoing expansion into human space. Ethan took a breath, willing himself to stay calm. He'd faced down alien warlords and survived battles that should have been impossible to win. But today, he was fighting a different kind of battle, one for Earth's future. And he needed them to listen. He cleared his throat, projecting his voice across the vast, sterile room. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything. Earth's soldiers are not like your typical foes. You believe that our technology is primitive, that our military might is nothing compared to your fleets. But you are gravely mistaken." The room shifted slightly, a few generals exchanging glances, but none dared to speak. Zeron barely glanced up, continuing to tap a command console beside him. "Continue, General. But make it brief. Our time is valuable." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't here to make idle chatter. He activated the holoscreen behind him, a brutal image flickering into view. It showed the aftermath of a skirmish between Earth's forces and an alien resistance group, human soldiers fighting in the mud, using scavenged weapons, bleeding, broken, yet still standing. They looked beaten, but they weren't done. "This is what you think of when you picture Earth's soldiers, ragged, outnumbered, exhausted," Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with intensity. "You've seen us as a nuisance, resilient, perhaps, but nothing that should concern the Empire." A murmur rippled through the room, but Zeron raised a hand. "This is irrelevant. We've encountered your human forces before. A few skirmishes. We know what you're capable of." Ethan's lips pressed together. "You don't know anything about us. We're not just resilient. We're adaptive. Our strength is in how we fight when we have nothing left. We can turn any terrain into an advantage, use anything at our disposal. And when we're outnumbered, we don't retreat, we innovate." Zeron's expression remained impassive. "So you want to warn us about your resourcefulness? This is laughable. What you describe is nothing more than desperation. The Empire's might cannot be outmatched by a handful of desperate humans." A low chuckle spread through the room, some of the officers scoffing openly. Ethan clenched his fists, his patience thinning. They weren't seeing it. The sheer arrogance in their stance was palpable. "You call it desperation, Admiral," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "I call it creativity under pressure. When humans fight, we don't just rely on our strength. We rely on our ingenuity. You've dismissed us as weak, primitive. But you haven't seen how we fight when there's no escape. You haven't seen a soldier fight for something, not just for conquest." A general raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "You claim to know us, Blackwell. What do you expect? A surrender?" "No," Ethan replied, his voice biting. "I expect you to prepare for the worst. I expect you to take us seriously before it's too late." Zeron finally stood up, towering over Ethan with a slow, deliberate movement. He stepped toward the human soldier, eyes glinting with amusement. "What is it you expect me to believe, General? That these creative tactics of yours are somehow the equal of our technology? We possess fleets capable of decimating planets. You're one man in a room full of soldiers who can barely hold their ground against even a small platoon of Imperial troops." Ethan didn't flinch. "You underestimate us. That's your first mistake." Zeron leaned in, the full weight of his arrogance bearing down on Ethan. "It's not underestimation, human. It's certainty. The Empire has conquered countless species, shattered civilizations, and absorbed their technologies into our own. I've seen the records. I've seen Earth's resources, pathetic at best. Your weapons, your ships, your planets, insignificant. What is it you think you'll achieve against us? Ethan's gaze never left Zeron's. You'll find out soon enough. A moment of silence passed, thick with the tension of two powerful forces at odds. Finally, Zeron gave a cold, humorless smile. General Blackwell, I'll tell you what you've failed to grasp. The Empire is not about conquest. We are about order. We are about the certainty that the galaxy bends to our will, and we will bring Earth to its knees as we've done to so many before. And you? He pointed sharply. You are nothing more than an insect, clinging to the remnants of your broken world. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't here to back down, not now, not ever. I've seen Earth's soldiers fight with their backs to the wall. We've been there before, and we've come out on top. We don't give up. And we'll show you what that really means. Zeron's expression faltered for just a moment, as if he understood something he hadn't expected to. It was fleeting, gone as quickly as it had appeared. He gave a dismissive wave, signaling the end of the discussion. Enough. This meeting is over. We've wasted enough time on your paranoia. Ethan turned on his heel, his eyes burning with unspoken fury. They wouldn't listen. They never listened. The fate of Earth didn't rest in the hands of politicians and generals who couldn't see past their own arrogance. But that didn't matter. He wasn't here for them. He was here to warn them. And the Empire would soon learn the price of ignoring humanity's resolve. As the doors to the command chamber hissed shut behind him, Ethan clenched his jaw. The Empire would regret this. They always did. The war had started, but Earth had already been at war long before the first blast of Imperial firepower. Sergeant Ethan Blackwell watched as the first wave of Empire troops touched down on Earth's surface. The sky above was a muted gray, the clouds heavy with rain and tension. Earth's cities, once bustling with the hum of everyday life, had transformed into makeshift fortresses. The sound of distant artillery echoed across the barren landscape, a constant reminder that humanity's final stand was underway. Ethan had seen it all before: alien planets, hostile terrain, endless enemies, but nothing had prepared him for this. Earth, his home, was now the battlefield. His pulse quickened as he watched the enemy forces deploy. Giant warships hovered over the city, blocking out the sun, their massive weapons trained on the population below. The Empire's might was on full display, vast, terrifying, and seemingly unstoppable. But humanity had always fought differently. Ethan turned to his small team of soldiers, all battle-hardened, all scarred by the wars they'd already fought. They stood ready, eyes steely, hands steady on their weapons. This wasn't their first fight, and it certainly wouldn't be their last. They had their orders, but most importantly, they had their purpose. Earth wasn't just a planet to them, it was the birthplace of humanity, a world they were willing to die for. We don't back down, Ethan muttered, his voice barely above the wind. We hit them hard. No mercy. Corporal Sarah Hayes, a sharp-eyed marksman and the youngest of the team, gave a tight nod. Understood, sir. We've got this. We just need to remember how they fight. They're not human. They won't understand what we're capable of. Ethan studied her face, knowing that she wasn't talking about just tactics, but the heart of it, the human spirit. Earth soldiers were no mere pawns in a galactic game. They were survivors, warriors forged by necessity, not grandeur. They'll understand soon enough, he said, eyes narrowing as the Empire's ships began to disgorge hundreds of soldiers onto Earth's surface. And when they do, it will be too late for them. The Empire's initial assault was everything they'd expected. A full-scale bombardment, followed by an invasion of well-equipped soldiers, their weapons sleek and deadly. Earth had nothing that could match the Empire's firepower, but it had one thing the Empire lacked: the will to win. Deploy the EMP, Ethan ordered. Take out their shields. We've got one shot at this. The order was met with swift compliance. As Earth soldiers had been fighting for decades in secret resistance movements, they'd learned to improvise. No one had thought to teach them how to fight with advanced tech. Instead, they'd used what they had: drones, scavenged weapons, and most effectively, their ingenuity. A blinding flash of light erupted in the distance. The EMP blast hit its mark, sending ripples of energy cascading through the atmosphere. The Empire's ships, hovering ominously above, began to shudder and falter. The electronic pulse tore through their shielding, disabling their superior technology. For the first time in weeks, Earth's fighters had the advantage. The Empire's soldiers, temporarily disoriented, began to scramble. But they weren't used to fighting back from such vulnerability. Ethan's team moved in quickly, taking positions behind abandoned structures. The air was thick with the sound of gunfire, the whine of laser blasts, and the guttural growl of human fury. Ethan surveyed the scene, his heart hammering in his chest. "We've got the opening," he barked. "Push them back. Make them feel it." The soldiers rushed forward, using the cover of ruins to launch surprise assaults. In the distance, the Empire's warships struggled to regain control, their crew members frantically working to restore their damaged shields and communication systems. As Ethan led the charge, he could hear the crackling of weapons fire and the strained breaths of his team. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for, the moment when humanity would rise from the ashes of their own underestimation. He ducked behind a piece of debris and peered through the scope of his rifle. One of the Empire's commanders, a tall, imposing alien, was barking orders to his troops, seemingly unaware of the chaos that had ensued. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Target locked. Permission to fire? Take him down," Ethan ordered. The rifle's shot rang out, the precise blast hitting the commander in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, his troops scattering in disarray. Ethan didn't pause to watch the result. There was no time for that. They had to keep moving. Ethan's squad had been trained to handle this, swift, precise, and relentless. They moved like a well-oiled machine, knowing instinctively where the next threat would come from, never hesitating. The battle stretched on for hours. The Empire's superior technology had given them the edge, but humanity's resilience, adaptability, and brutal efficiency were starting to break through. Each wave of Imperial forces was met with explosive resistance. Earth soldiers had learned not just to fight back, but to fight smart. Their tactics, their environment, and their will were the greatest weapons they possessed. As night fell, the first wave of Imperial soldiers began to retreat. Ethan and his squad stood at the forefront, watching as their enemy faltered under the weight of their own hubris. The Empire had underestimated Earth, assuming its soldiers were nothing more than a nuisance, an obstacle to be removed quickly. But now, they were learning the hard way. Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction as the Empire's troops pulled back. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was a victory, small as it was. Earth had just sent the Empire a message. "Status report?" Ethan asked, breathing heavily. Sarah, her voice cool despite the chaos around her, replied, "We're holding strong. A few units still resisting, but they're scattering. We've got them on the run." Ethan turned to face her, his gaze steady. "Good. But we've only just begun. The Empire won't stop until they've wiped us off the map. We need to get ready for what's next. They'll bring more. We need to be ready." "I know. We will be." The battle had just begun, and the road ahead was long and treacherous. But for now, Ethan allowed himself a rare smile. The Empire had just learned a valuable lesson: humans don't roll over. Not when their homes were at stake. Not when their future was on the line. And Earth soldiers would keep fighting, no matter the odds. The ground trembled beneath Ethan Blackwell's boots as the Empire's second wave descended like a storm. Earth had won its first battle, but that victory was fleeting. The enemy's overwhelming power was still looming overhead. The Empire had gathered its forces, regrouped, and now it was time to show Earth what true might look like. Ethan stood on the edge of a ruined city block, watching the sky darken with the shadows of enormous warships descending. He could hear the faint hum of their engines, a sound that had once filled him with dread. But now, it only stirred a deep sense of defiance. They had underestimated humanity before. Now, the tables were turning, and this time, Earth would make them regret their arrogance. How much longer before they're in firing range? Ethan asked, turning to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mia Reyes. She scanned the horizon through a pair of military-grade binoculars. Another few minutes, Mia said. We've got a couple of EMP devices left, but they won't last long against that fleet. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. They had anticipated the Empire's response, but even the best-planned strategies had their limits. Earth was outgunned. Outnumbered. But what the Empire didn't know was that they had just awakened a sleeping giant, the raw, untapped potential of human ingenuity. He clapped Mia on the shoulder. Then we make it count. Understood, sir. Mia moved to relay the orders to their team of soldiers stationed around the city. It was up to them now. A blast of static crackled over Ethan's comms. General Blackwell, came the voice of Corporal Hayes. Enemies closing in on the western outskirts. We're holding them off for now, but there are too many of them. Hold your ground, Corporal, Ethan responded, the steel in his voice cutting through the noise. We've got one shot at this. Don't let them take the city. We'll be there in 5 minutes. Stay sharp. Copy that. As Ethan turned to the team gathered around him, a somber mood settled in. They had won the first round, but they were losing ground quickly. The Empire's reinforcements had arrived in full force, and with them, a new weapon, the Imperial Leviathan-class war machines. Massive, towering walkers that seemed like something out of a nightmare, bristling with weapons that could level entire cities in seconds. We've got to stop them, Ethan muttered to himself, his fingers twitching at the thought of the carnage that could follow if the Empire pushed any further. Now. He turned back to Mia, giving her the signal to advance. Time to give them a fight they won't forget. The team split into smaller groups, moving swiftly through the abandoned streets, using the city's broken infrastructure to their advantage. A crumbling building here, a collapsed overpass there. The perfect cover for guerrilla warfare. The ground began to shake as the first of the Leviathan walkers came into view, its enormous feet crashing down with earth-shattering force. It was a mechanical beast of destruction, towering over the rubble of the city like an unstoppable juggernaut. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Target the legs, he ordered over the comms. Take out its mobility, and it's just another machine. Understood, Mia responded, her voice laced with determination. We've got a couple of rocket launchers left. They'll be close enough for a clean shot in 2 minutes. Ethan turned to one of the soldiers behind him. Keep moving. The Empire isn't stopping, and neither are we. They pressed forward, weaving through the remains of Earth's once thriving metropolis. The last thing they needed was to face a direct assault from the Empire's full forces. They had no illusions. They couldn't win this war on brute strength alone. But they could bleed the Empire dry, make them pay for every inch of ground they took. The crackle of weapons fire filled the air, and then the unmistakable roar of the Leviathan's weapons. Ethan dove for cover, feeling the heat of the blast even from a distance. Report! He shouted, his pulse racing. Nemae! Came a voice from the comms. We've got a walker locking onto us, 3 blocks to the west. We need backup. Stay alive, Corporal. We're coming. With a sharp, guttural exhale, Ethan moved swiftly toward the sound of the explosions. His team followed, unwavering, ready to sacrifice everything for Earth. As they reached the western sector, Ethan could see it, the Leviathan, its massive frame casting a shadow over the remnants of a former high-rise building. Several of Earth's soldiers were pinned down, their return fire ineffective against the beast's armored plating. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lifted his rifle, targeting the Leviathan's lower joints. The machine's thick armor was designed to withstand most conventional weapons, but the joints, the weak spots, were vulnerable. Fire in 3, 2, 1! Mia's voice cracked through his earpiece. Simultaneously, 2 rocket launchers fired, their warheads streaking through the air toward the walker's legs. The impact was deafening, and the Leviathan staggered. It was just a small victory, but in this war, every victory counted. Nice shot! Ethan shouted. Now we finish it. The Empire soldiers around the Leviathan scrambled to reposition, but Earth's soldiers were relentless. Ethan and his team pressed forward, storming the streets with an unstoppable force. With their legs disabled, the Leviathan tried to adjust its massive body, but it was slow. Vulnerable. A precise shot to its control center finished the job, and the great war machine crumpled to the ground with a loud crash. The remaining Empire forces stumbled back in shock. But there was no time for celebration. The air was still thick with the sounds of battle, and there were more where that came from. Ethan's eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the sight of the Empire's warships in the distance. They were regrouping, preparing for another strike. The first Leviathan had fallen, but there were more coming. The question wasn't whether Earth's forces could hold out. It was whether they could survive long enough to make the Empire feel the full weight of their rebellion. "We've got a window," Ethan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We need to move fast. We strike them now, while they're still disoriented." The team readied themselves. They knew that this battle wasn't just about surviving, it was about sending a message. And they would make sure the Empire heard it loud and clear. Ethan looked over at Mia, who nodded in return. "For Earth," she said, her voice fierce. "For Earth," he echoed. And with that, they charged once more into the fray, ready to make the Empire regret ever underestimating humanity. The Empire's relentless march across Earth had turned the once vibrant cities into graveyards of shattered glass and twisted metal. In every corner of the world, humanity fought, but Ethan Blackwell knew that the clock was ticking. The Empire's reinforcements had arrived in full force. Earth's cities were no longer battlegrounds, they were traps. And every trap had a final snap. The final stand would be at the heart of the capital, where Earth's last line of defense had rallied. The Resistance had done everything to delay the Empire's invasion, but this was it. The Empire's command center loomed ahead, an enormous, towering fortress of steel and glass, guarded by hundreds of war machines and an army of elite soldiers. It was humanity's last shot. Fail here, and Earth would fall. "We're almost there," Mia Reyes said, her voice tight but determined as they crouched behind the remnants of a collapsed building. "The Empire's forces are concentrated in the city center. We've got the element of surprise, but not for long." Ethan nodded, scanning the battlefield ahead. A handful of their soldiers were scattered across the ruins, preparing for the final push. He didn't need to tell them what was at stake. Each of them knew this would be their last battle, and they were prepared to die for Earth's survival. "We fight like we always have, fast, hard, and unforgiving," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We take down their command center, and we make them pay for every inch of Earth they've taken." Mia looked up at him, her eyes steely. "We won't let them down." The sound of distant explosions echoed through the air, the Empire's advanced technology smashing into Earth's defenses. It felt as though the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon and gave one last nod to his team. "Move out," he commanded, stepping forward into the heart of the chaos. The streets were eerily silent, the once bustling city reduced to a war zone. Broken vehicles and abandoned structures provided minimal cover as they moved, but the Empire's heavy artillery loomed overhead, patrolling the skies with deadly precision. Ethan led the charge, ducking behind a rusted vehicle, then signaling to the team. "We're close. Push forward!" The sound of rapid fire rang out as they moved. The first wave of Empire soldiers appeared in the distance, their heavy armor and energy shields gleaming in the dim light. They had the advantage of numbers and technology, but humanity had learned long ago that fighting wasn't just about strength. It was about survival. "Focus on the flanks," Ethan yelled. "Don't engage until you've got the angle." The soldiers scattered, moving swiftly and silently, taking up strategic positions. In moments, they were firing. Laser beams lit up the sky as they took out the advancing Empire forces, picking off soldiers from a distance, targeting weak points in their armor. Ethan's mind raced through the tactics they had rehearsed for this very moment. The battle for Earth had reached its breaking point, but this was their final chance to turn the tide. The Empire wasn't going to give up easily. Moments later, the sky darkened as an Imperial warship descended, its massive hull casting a shadow over the city. It hovered just above them, its massive weapons charging. The final assault was beginning. "Take cover!" Mia shouted as the ship opened fire, energy blasts pounding the ground where they had just been standing. The air sizzled with the intensity of the barrage. Ethan dove behind a large debris pile, heart pounding. The warship was now hovering directly above their position, its massive cannons tracking every movement. They couldn't stay here. "Charge!" Ethan shouted, his voice hoarse with adrenaline. "Now or never!" The team surged forward, their weapons firing relentlessly as they sprinted toward the enemy's command center. Each step felt like an eternity, the ground shaking beneath them with every blast from the Empire's warship. They had no choice but to push through. The Empire was confident that no one could stand against them. But humanity had never needed confidence, it had always needed defiance. They reached the entrance of the command center, a fortified building guarded by a dozen soldiers and several war droids. The Empire's forces were concentrated here, and Ethan knew it was their only shot. "Set the charges," Ethan said, his voice low but commanding. "We blow the doors and clear a path." The team worked quickly, placing explosives on the reinforced doors, while Ethan scanned the area for movement. The battle raged on around them, but this was it, the moment of truth. "Ready!" Mia called, stepping back from the explosives. "Detonate!" Ethan ordered. The explosion rocked the ground, the thick doors blasted apart, sending debris flying in all directions. The team moved in, weapons raised. They encountered heavy resistance from the Empire's soldiers, but their determination was stronger. They pushed forward, clearing the entrance with brutal efficiency. Inside, the command center was a labyrinth of corridors and control rooms. The walls hummed with the power of the Empire's technology, but it wasn't enough to stop Earth's soldiers. They had one goal: reach the command hub and shut down the Empire's operations once and for all. A sudden explosion ripped through the hallway, sending Earth's soldiers diving for cover. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as the blast wave hit. Smoke and dust filled the air. When the chaos cleared, Ethan saw the silhouette of a massive war droid, its red eyes glowing ominously. It was blocking their path, its weapons aimed directly at them. "Damn it," Ethan muttered. "It's too strong for conventional weapons." Mia's voice crackled through the comms. "We need to fall back, regroup." "Regroup?" Ethan shot back, not even thinking. "No! We take it down, now!" Ethan sprinted toward the war droid, knowing full well the risk. The Empire had thrown everything at them, and they had nothing left to lose. His team followed, flanking the droid, but it was fast, faster than they had anticipated. Its blaster fire ripped through the air, and Ethan dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly barrage. "Mia!" he shouted. "Take the legs out! Now!" Mia, without hesitation, fired the remaining rockets straight into the droid's joints. The blast sent it reeling, its movements slowing. It was the opening they needed. Ethan dove into the fray, a burst of energy from his rifle hitting the droid's central core. The explosion was deafening. The droid collapsed in a heap of metal and circuitry, smoke billowing from its wreckage. The Empire's defenses were crumbling. "Keep moving!" Ethan barked, motioning for the team to push forward. They entered the central control room, the heart of the Empire's operation. Ethan's hand trembled as he approached the control panel, but there was no time for hesitation. He activated the self-destruct sequence for the Empire's command center. "It's done," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion gnawing at him. "Let's get out of here." The building began to shake as alarms blared. Ethan didn't look back as they sprinted through the wreckage, making their way toward the exit. Earth had made its final stand. The Empire's arrogance had led them here, to this moment of destruction. And now, the battle for Earth's survival had been won. As Ethan and his team emerged into the streets, they saw it, the Empire's ships, retreating. The war was far from over, but Earth had sent a message. No matter how powerful, no matter how vast, humanity would never be defeated. "For Earth," Mia whispered, her voice filled with awe. Yes, Ethan replied, watching the sky above. For Earth,